welcome to Have Your Say. I'm Ann Minicozzi, president of the Community Breakfast Collaborative, here with our co-host Diana Robertson, president of the NAACP Mainline Branch. And today our guest we're happy to greet is Bob Toth Jr., who is from the Allentown office of the U.S. Bureau of the Census. So today we're talking about the 2020 census and how important it is. Before we begin our conversation with each other, we're going to run a public service announcement, and then we'll come back to our program. So take a look at this announcement.
What is the 2020 census? Every 10 years, the census records everyone living in this country. It's written in the Constitution and comes in a questionnaire that counts everyone who lives at your address on April 1st. The data can be used to inform funding for services like fire stations, schools, clinics, and representation that affect your community.
How will 2020 census data be used? Where there are more people, there are more needs for public services. That's why the census is used by the government to inform funding decisions each year. But that's not all. It's also used by nonprofits to inform services, by businesses to create jobs, and even by students for school projects. Understanding how the population changes helps us shape communities across the country for the better.
How does the 2020 census affect representation? There are 435 seats in the House of Representatives. These get distributed to the 50 states by population, and an accurate census response helps your state get the right amount of seats. States with smaller populations get at least one, while states with larger populations might get more.
How do I take the 2020 census? In March 2020, every address in the country will receive an invitation to complete a simple questionnaire. And there are 3 ways to respond. Number 1, do it online. Number 2, call by phone. Number 3, send it by mail. For those who don't respond, a census taker from your community will follow up and assist you.
Is my 2020 census data safe? After sending your census response, your personal information is kept safe. By law, it can't be shared with any other government agency, law enforcement, or landlord. No one. So take your 2020 census with peace of mind. Shape your future. Start here. Visit 2020census.gov.
Good. So I'm glad we were able to show that public service announcement and include that at the beginning to give an overview of the information about the census. The way that we usually start is ask you to talk a little bit about yourself. And I know before we started recording, we talked about your public service, your interest in public service. But if you could just give us a little background about yourself and what brought you to working for the census.
Well, thank you for very much, but it's a long road to what brought me to the census, but the short story is my family has been involved in public service for many years, from my parents and my grandfather being involved with the Allentown city government. But I always had an interest in public service since I was a Boy Scout. I'm proud to say that I am an Eagle Scout. And after high school, I decided to join the military, enlisted in the Marine Corps. I served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then after I decided to use the GI Bill and go to college, I was a student at Kutztown University, and I represented all the Kutztown University students on the Kutztown Borough Council as their non-voting, non-voting representative for 2 years. And then I went on to my post-college career to be involved a little bit in politics and funeral directing. But I really missed being in public service, and the U.S. Census Bureau was a very quick avenue to get back into that, and I really enjoy what I do up at the Allentown Area Census Office.
Good.
Very good.
Good. Yes, in terms of the census, I think, the reason why we wanted to record this program is to help get the word out that it's very important that everybody participate in taking the census. So maybe first of all we could talk about, in addition to what's shown in the public service announcement, just why it's so important to complete it. So
it's really important, and I look at it for 3 main reasons. One is your civic duty. It is mandated by the United States Constitution. We had our very first census conducted in 1790. Thomas Jefferson, who was the Secretary of State, oversaw that census, and since then it's been every 10 years. So it's your civic duty. The second thing is congressional representation. We want to make sure we have the correct amount of representatives working for us in Washington to ensure that Pennsylvanians' voices are heard in the House of Representatives. So it's important that we count everybody and count everybody once and in the right place so that we can have that adequate representation in Congress. Third of all, it's for over $600 billion of federal funding is at stake for 50 states. And so we want to make sure Pennsylvania gets its fair share to help us with the funding for schools, bridges, roads, public goods such as police and fire services. So it's really important that people take the census very seriously, that when they do get their questionnaires that they fill it out and make sure that they reach out back to the census once they are informed it's time that they need to count themselves.
Okay. Yeah, and we talked a little bit about the effort in the state of Pennsylvania. So there are a number of different offices and things like that, different areas. So if you could just talk about how that is divided up, because you're responsible for a certain area.
Of course, yeah. So there are 9 area census offices through the state of Pennsylvania. And each office could be larger or smaller on a geographical area, all depending on the caseload for that region. So we do have 2 offices in Philadelphia. We have an office in Norristown, Allentown, Reading, State College, Cranberry Township, Pittsburgh, and I don't believe I missed anything else there. So it's we do have our local offices that are there to assist with the census, and then each local office reports to a regional office. Our regional office is in Philadelphia, and obviously Philadelphia reports to the headquarters in Maryland.
Okay. So one of the questions I have, I just actually, out of one of my meetings this morning, at talking to college students. So, and one of the questions is, when the forms come out, do college students, obviously you have certain college students who reside in Pennsylvania, but you have others who are outside of Pennsylvania. Where do they, what are they using as their residency when they're completing the form?
That's a very good question. That's a question.
Because it was posed,
important.
Yes.
and I didn't know. I was like, oh, let me ask that question, yes.
So April 1st is Census Day.
Right.
And that's essentially the snapshot. So where you are residing on April 1st is where you are supposed to be counted. So college students are supposed to be counted where they live on April 1st. So that means that if they're living in a dormitory or if they're living in off-campus housing, that is where they are supposed to be counted. So right now we currently have an operation going on called the Group Quarters Advanced Contact, and we have a team of clerks and supervisors that are dedicated to contacting what they've designated as the group quarters sites in the area census office. And so, for example, one of the biggest caseloads for the clerks is the colleges and the universities. So their job is to reach out to the universities and for their point of contact to try to count and make sure all the college students living on campus are counted that way. But then we have a operation beginning in the middle of April, which is called Early Non-Response Follow-Up, and we send people out to knock on your door, and they will have valid ID, to help enumerate. That's a fancy word we like to use for count, and that's written in the Constitution, to help enumerate or count those college students before they head home after the semester is over.
Okay, so now the forms go to households.
That's correct.
Right? So if a student is away at college, they come back home, or they're like even a senior, they finish, they come back home. So does the family, the parents, let's say, when they're filling out the form and they're listing their children, they're going to most likely include everybody.
So I'll,
So how does that, is it,
I'll take a step.
are you counting it twice then? I guess is my
No, we don't
question.
want to
Yeah.
count. The goal of the census is to count everybody once, and count them in the right place.
Right.
So parents should not count their children living away at college or universities. They are going to be counted where they are residing on April 1st, whether it's in a dormitory or off-campus housing. So I'll take a step back. So in March, this is people are going to start to receive postcards in the mail. And this census is unique, whereas none like any other census that we're employing technology at all levels.
Yeah.
This will be the first time that people will be able to enumerate or count themselves by phone or online. And there'll be instructions on how they can do that in the postcard that they receive in the mail in the beginning of March. So if somehow person doesn't want to go online, if they don't want to use the phone, then they can wait for the paper copy. The paper copy will come in the middle of April. That way you can fill it out, mail it back, and then you'll be finished. The only time somebody would have to come and knock on your door is if you do use one of those three options: the online, the by phone, and by the paper copy. All this information is also on census.gov as well. So to get back to your question of the college students should not be counted where their parents reside. They are going to be counted in the dormitory or the off-campus housing where they reside during the semester.
Yeah, and the way that I understand it, I'm glad that you're clarifying it too, because it's that's so important, is the snapshot is April 1st, where you reside and where you usually reside for most of the year.
That's correct.
So if someone were away for the weekend in another state, not our state of Pennsylvania, you wouldn't count that. You were there on April 1st. You mostly reside in Pennsylvania in your, at your school or something like that. So that's where you would be counted. So I hope that clarifies more than
Yeah, so if you're
where you
away on
mostly
vacation,
reside.
for April 1st, you're not supposed to be counted wherever you're on vacation.
Right.
It's where you reside for most of the year. That is correct.
Right.
Yes.
And I like what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying about the census being really a patriotic duty. That this is all of our responsibility and our opportunity to participate and to be counted. And it reminds me of the title of our show, Have Your Say,
Right.
because you're getting counted, you're enumerating, which I also like that word, that it's very important to participate in that. One of the things that's been happening locally for us here that I was hoping we could talk about for a minute is different civic organizations and religious faith communities are having information sessions about the census. And I know one church in particular, they're publicizing that they're going to have laptops available. So if someone doesn't have one, or if it's just easier to fill it out when they're there, they can do that. So do you have some information like other places where people are really organizing themselves through their different civic and religious associations, educationals, the universities, different communities, where people are organizing to help make sure that everybody gets counted?
Yes, so there will be a small operation throughout the country called the Mobile Questionnaire, and that we will have census workers working out in the field to be at community places such as libraries or churches to help people enumerate themselves, count themselves, fill out the census form. To get more information on that, you could go to 2020census.gov. That will probably answer all your questions on how that operation is going to take place. But there will be people working out in the field. They will have proper identification to help you enumerate or count yourself in the 2020 census.
And how about places like, it just crossed my mind, places like nursing homes and places where people, may not be able to get out, but,
So
there'll be people being able to go to those places as well?
So that's a good question. The nursing homes, prisons are defined what they like to call group quarters. So when there's more than 3 people living in a residence, we've identified it as a group quarters site, and they will be enumerated or counted. They will have a census worker visit them so they can count everybody at that nursing home, or everybody at that prison, or everybody at that college dormitory.
Okay. And then the other way that's so important to participate is to be a census employee, a temporary employee, and I think that's important to talk about those opportunities. So you described the census employees who go out to homes starting by April 15th, right?
Yes, so that's a very, very good topic. Most, if not most, positions that the census is offering and hiring for temporary positions are going to be field-based. So it's going to be people out in the field, work from home. Home's going to be your base. You're going to be issued government devices to help enumerate or count the people that you're going to be responsible for do so. All job opportunities are available on 2020census.gov. All applications do go through 2020census.gov. So this is, again, the first time we're implementing technology at levels we've never used before in the census, that there's no longer paper applications, that everybody who's interested in applying. No resume required. You just need to be 18 years old, a citizen of the United States, and you will have to clear a background check. And more information can be on 2020census.gov.
Good, good. And I want to say also, just for an example, but also because I just so enjoyed this, I participated in the census in 1990 down in South Carolina, and so I was in very rural areas. The training was paid for, so I was paid for my training, and it was a good hourly rate. I know the hourly rate now is much higher.
Yes.
You know, really, really enticing.
So an average hourly rate, I know for this area, it's all depends on what the Department of Labor has as for the geographics, but they're going to say the hourly rate is a minimum of $16 an hour.
Okay.
For the temporary census workers, and so it is paid training, like you said, and you will be trained. You'll have to do some online training, and then you'll have to take an assessment, and then you'll be ready to go out to the field and help us with the largest operation, which we call non-response follow-up, and those are the people that haven't responded to the 3 ways in which you can count yourselves or enumerate yourself by online, by phone, or by the paper mail.
And I found it to be really a lot of fun because you're going and you're helping people take the census. You know, if someone's had a busy week or a busy couple of weeks and they just haven't gotten around to the paper copy and everything, now you're coming and helping them complete it. So a lot of times the reaction that I've had was, oh, thank goodness, now I can check that off of my list. I finished, that, and have a nice conversation, go through the questions fairly quickly, and complete it. Now that's all set. But also I think that goes back to the civic, patriotic sense of duty that you're helping. And so I do say that I recommend that, you know, if anybody wants to do that, you know, it's a good temporary job, and then you're also helping. But also in terms of Pennsylvania, how are we as a state compared to other states in getting our count in? Is that something that you would know from previous censuses? Do we do a good job? I kind of feel like, you know, our whole state of Pennsylvania, maybe we can, you know, have a good count this time around, good enumeration this time around.
So they do have, you can go to 2020census.gov in order to find out multiple information. I can say that, you know, every year, every 10 years at the census, we believe in the mission that we count everybody. We count everybody once, and we count everybody in the right place. So moving forward, we always continue with that mission of you know, we do count everybody. We make sure that every single person, we work our hardest to ensure that everybody is counted and they're counted in the right place, so that Pennsylvania can receive its fair share of over the $600 billion in federal funding that would come to the state, and our congressional representation that we have in Washington in the Congress.
And I think that's important to emphasize, because I think the more people understand that, the impact of not being counted, you know, that we could actually, and I think a couple of times we may have actually lost officers as a result of the count and all of that for the representation and funding.
Yeah.
And so for people to understand that in order to receive
Pennsylvania's fair share. Yeah.
right, our fair share, then we need to have that information. We need to be counted and have that information so that all of that is included in making that determination. So.
That is correct, and that the census is 100% safe, according to Title 15. We protect everybody's personal information, and every federal employee that works for the census, even if temporary or permanent, they take an oath to uphold that Title 13. So we do keep people's confidentiality, and that is very important. That the census is safe, and that the census will keep your personal information confidential.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's important also because as a country we only do it once every 10 years. So if you have an undercount, that's going to last. That impact is long lasting.
So it's very important that again at the Census Bureau that we count everybody once and count them in the right place, and we deliver what we find to the executive branch by the end of this year.
Okay. And you did mention in the prison systems as well, the folks are counted.
They are part of that group quarters operation. We make sure that everybody is counted in the right place and only once. That is for sure.
Yeah, good.
Okay. So if you basically had to say, what can, I think this is probably one of the times that I've heard so much, information about getting out the count. I think this is one of the first times that you hear about it, but I think people are really getting out there and making people aware. So, and I know as part of my church, I want them to be a part of that ability to be a site where people can actually come out and use online, just being able to enter in their information after church service or whatever. Here's time, take time out, do it now, and have it done. Yeah. So, so just being able to post information and just keep talking about it. Is there any one thing that you think kind of highlights it or get people who might not necessarily have been interested to really kind of take hold or really think about it and
well, I think it's just it's important that to make sure that everybody is counted for those three main reasons that I mentioned earlier. That is your civic duty. That we want to make sure we have the adequate representatives in the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. representing us and fighting for us to make sure that Pennsylvania's voices are heard in Washington, D.C. And it is also important. There are over $600 billion of federal funds at stake that will help us with our roads, our bridges, our schools, our public services, police and fire services, that sort of thing. We want to make sure that we get our fair share. We want to make sure that for the next 10 years that we will receive the federal funds that we are supposed to receive to help us out with, help Pennsylvanians out with all of the activities they need to in their daily life.
You were talking earlier that you majored in history as one of your majors in college, and thinking of the census and thinking of doing genealogical research. When I was doing that, the census, I think another reason to take the census is to do it for your grandchildren of the future who are looking back to the past. I've looked up things on Ancestry.com and those kind of websites, and you can look at the census data. And so I looked up my great-grandmother and how she was a seamstress, 100 years ago or something like that. So it has the name of the person. Now this is handwritten in cursive. Does anybody use cursive anymore? A little bit. So you have the handwriting, you have the name of the person, the household, what their occupation was. And so then if you are counted now, now we're recording that for the future for our grandchildren
That's
and
right.
and,
Sure.
and that kind of thing. And it's so interesting to be able to know those specific details that my great-grandmother was living in Rochester in New York at such and such, sorry, not Pennsylvania, at the time, and that history, that kind of thing. So if we're, doing it for ourselves, doing it for emergency services,
Right,
our
yeah.
count in Congress, there's just so many compelling reasons to be counted, but also for historic value.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. I know that my
Absolutely.
family comes from Allentown on both sides, and it's important that, someday, my children or grandchildren will want to know those facts,
Right.
know, where their piece of history came from,
Right.
how their ancestors fit into that piece of the puzzle for the United States,
Right.
that experiment of democracy we call the United States for so many years now. So we really, it's just the census is a very important thing for not only for the three main things I've talked about, but like you said, for people learning about their ancestors
Right.
and where they came from, what their story was. The census will be able to help with that.
True. So we thank you for being our guest today.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me here.
And talking about the census, talking about being counted and the importance of that, and understanding that as we look to be counted in the census for this year, that will be a way that all of you will be able to have your say. Thank you.